As early as March of 2019, Sony told Variety that they had the next 7 years worth of Spider-Man themed movies mapped out. The article is primarily focused on the TV side of things. In light of Sony's recently corroding relationship with Marvel, those plans may have hit a bump in the road. However, where the movies are concerned, Sony alone have greenlighting powers and creative control, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. The article doesn't detail which movies they have planned, but from the Sony hack we know that most of the Spider-Man themed movies currently in development, they have been recycled from the last time Sony tried to set up a Spider-Man cinematic universe. You may recall that they tried to do so in conjunction with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but those plans were derailed when that movie underperformed. Due to the Sony hack, we also know what those plans were, and since various degrees of development already went into them, even more of these projects could resurface over the course of the next few years. In this video, we will go through which projects Sony set up the last time they tried to establish a Marvel universe, as well as which of these are in development again, or which may resurface in the future. If you like the content of this video, then please help share it, leave a comment, leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, click subscribe and indicate that you want notifications for all videos. With the mandatory plug out of the way, let's dig into the Sony hack. Venom had been in some stages of development since 2000 and went through numerous iterations over the years. At one point, Josh Trank, who later directed Fantastic Four, was set to direct, and later on in its development, the movie was given the tentative title of Venom: Carnage, pitting the title anti-hero against the subtitled villain. Later still, the project lost steam as more resources were diverted into Sinister 6, a movie which, at one point, was set to feature both Venom and Carnage, but more on that in a moment. In 2018, however, a later iteration of Venom was released, but without Spider-Man, who was at this time locked up in the MCU. In fact, the financial success of Venom was instrumental in Sony later opting to remove Spider-Man from the MCU. The Venom sequel is currently in pre-production and will feature Carnage. Andy Serkis has signed on to direct. In the aftermath of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, KRAVEN was conceived as a prequel. The film would be set between the events of The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This would facilitate the return of Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy and explain the goblin sickness that ran in the Osborn family. However, after Andrew Garfield got himself fired, those plans were scuttled, and the option of using the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline as a means of rebooting Spider-Man with a new actor were being considered. Following the success of Venom, a KRAVEN movie was greenlit. In October of last year, writer Richard Wenk teased that the KRAVEN movie would be centered around the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline and that it might feature Spider-Man, something which suggests that Sony might have already then have decided to take Spider-Man back. The female-led Spider-Man spin-off, codenamed Glass Ceiling, began as a project proposed by Amy Pascal. Pascal believed that Hollywood needed more women-led movies. With access to limited Spider-Man characters, Pascal would select the character of Silver Sable, an anti-hero who led a group of mercenaries called the Wild Pack. Rose Byrne was the top pick to play the title character. Director Paul Feig was attached to direct, and it was his early work on Silver Sable that led Amy Pascal to appoint him to helm the Ghostbusters remake, after she hijacked Ghostbusters 3 from Ivan Reitman. Even though Silver Sable was described as a female-led spin-off, the Wild Pack itself had a diverse roster, which included 4 women, Silver Sable, Black Cat, Stunner, and Lightbright, and 3 men, Overdrive, Raul Quintino, and Spider-Man. This movie is still in development, now under the working title Silver and Black, with Black Cat presumably having a bigger role. Out of all of Sony's initial batch of planned Spider-Man spin-offs, Sinister 6 received the greatest amount of development and was the closest to actually being made. Daredevil executive producer Drew Goddard had signed up to write and direct what was intended to be Sony's answer to the Avengers. While never finalized, the proposed roster for the Sinister Six included the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, the Vulture, Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, and the Rhino. Other candidates included Black Cat, Scorpia, Anna Kravinoff, Venom, Shriek, Sandman, and Spider-Man himself being a reluctant member. Internally, Sony came up with a number of suggestions on who could play these roles, including Tom Hardy as the Sandman and Woody Harrelson as Dr. Octopus, both of whom would go on to star as Venom and Carnage for them a few years later. Carnage was incidentally planned to be the primary villain of the movie, but Sandman was meant to be the comic relief and would become a giant sand monster in the film's final act. In an email that Drew Goddard wrote to raise enthusiasm on the project, it said, "He's gonna storm through London at the end like God fucking Zilla. That is not purple prose. He's going to be as tall as a skyscraper in the third act of the movie. What does Doctor Strange have? Magic tricks? Fuck you, magic tricks. We've got a skyscraper Tom Hardy knocking down buildings." It should be noted that many of the ideas addressed in this time frame, such as taking Spider-Man out of New York and placing him in other famous cities, with London, England, and Paris, France frequently coming up as talking points, did make it on screen in Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man 2099 was intended to be similar to Captain America: The First Avenger of the planned shared universe, a period piece that would lead directly into a big event film. However, unlike Captain America, which was set in the past, 2099 was set in the future, with New York transformed into a Blade Runner-esque world of crowded slums and gigantic corporate skyscrapers. The movie would involve Miguel O'Hara, a scientist who replicated the effects of the genetically altered spider experiment, taking on the mega corporation Alchemax. The Spider-Man of the future would have faced either the Venom of that time period, who worked for Alchemax, or Morlun, who had utilized time travel and dimension warping abilities to hunt down the superhero. Regardless of the villain that Miguel O'Hara faced, the battle at the end would send him back in time to present-day New York, where he would meet the original Spider-Man as a lead-in to another movie. While the 2099 Spider-Man meeting the original would serve as a cliffhanger, the film would be followed by a Black Cat solo movie, a prequel that would still be important to the build-up to the upcoming event movie, Maximum Carnage. In this event feature film, Carnage would prove to be so powerful that it would take an alliance of the two Spider-Men, Venom, Black Cat, and quite possibly a few members of the Sinister Six to take him down. In other words, the movie would have been a loose adaptation of the rather infamous Maximum Carnage crossover event. It would in turn have been followed by the Jackal and the Clone Saga. That at least was the intention of one executive, but it should be stressed that there was no agreement on a single overarching plan. For all of the development that went into individual projects, there was never any consensus, though there were numerous suggested slates. Conversations were being had about running two alternating trilogies of Spider-Man films based on two separate long-form story arcs. Among the options listed for these trilogies were The Death of Spider-Man, based on the Ultimate Marvel storyline introducing Miles Morales as the successor to Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man, a storyline where Dr. Octopus swaps minds with Peter Parker and becomes an unconventional anti-hero, The Clone Saga, which would have picked up where the proposed Amazing Spider-Man Jackal movie left off, and a series of Venom Carnage movies that would have brought a greater number of symbiote characters into the mix. In addition to the Venom Carnage movies, another Venom movie produced by Matt Tolmach was planned. Agent Venom was also fleetingly discussed as a potential spin-off. Tolmach was also slated to produce a sequel to Sinister 6 if the movie did well enough to ensure a sequel, along with potential follow-ups after that. Furthermore, Sony expressed interest in letting Sam Raimi direct a trilogy of films based entirely around the Silver Age version of Spider-Man, if he agreed to come back to the franchise. Under this scenario, the explicit goal would have been to split the franchise between multiple film series, two separate trilogies, a handful of side movies, and a continuation of the Sinister 6 franchise. None of these plans, however, came to fruition at the time. Then the Sony hack happened, and in its aftermath, the Spider-Man rights sharing deal with Marvel came to be. This would see Spider-Man make 5 appearances in the MCU. As a consequence, all development on Sony's initially planned Spider-Man Cinematic Universe came to a halt. That is, until they resurfaced with Venom, which turned out to be a hit. The next movie out in Sony's Venomverse, or their resurfaced Spider-Man Cinematic Universe, is Morbius the Living Vampire. How that will perform and influence future proceedings is still anyone's guess, but it would appear that Sony do have a plan in place this time around. Are you excited for it, and which of their earlier developed movies would you like to see resurface? Let us know in the comments, and do check out the highlighted videos for a deeper dive into the Sony hack and the history of Spider-Man on film.